My name's Erik Long, and I'm an alcoholic.
Hi, Erik.
And it's been by the grace of God, sponsorship, and action in AA. I've been sober since December 12th of '87, and really appreciate being asked to be here tonight. As we always hear, it's absolutely true for me. It's an honor to speak in an AA meeting, and it's certainly very contrary to my nature, or at least before I came to Alcoholics Anonymous. I was terrified of you finding out what I was really like, and certainly wouldn't want to put myself in a position where you might be able to see how crazy I really was, and was terrified of that. So, being behind a podium is certainly something that would not have been able to do if it weren't for Alcoholics Anonymous. The flip side of that, though, and to add a little bit to what Mike said, it was a 3.5-hour drive, but the fact is I would drive great distance today to hear the sound of my own voice. I usually enjoy what I have to say, and I'm enamored with what I'm saying. So, it's funny. I'm not kidding. But really, this is a group that, like Bobby said, it's much like our group, and has the same name, but it's also, there's a passion here for Alcoholics Anonymous, and that passion is rooted in, an absolute necessity to surrender. And I think, you can sum that up purely in the ethic of sponsorship. The fact that there's some structure here, and there's a plan of action. It's very clear what you guys do. There's no mystery to that. There's no guesswork needed. You simply can fall in line and do what we do, and you'll be all right. And, that's what I need. And I desperately need that kind of structure in my life today. And it doesn't matter how long you've been involved in Alcoholics Anonymous, you still need that if you're an alcoholic like I am. I absolutely need to have a home and to have a place where, I can plug in and I can be a part of. And it's somewhat challenging, a little bit for me, only because in my group I got the most sobriety. And so we can be leaders in Alcoholics Anonymous, and I think everybody's got a shot at being a leader in Alcoholics Anonymous. You just have to stay long enough. But it's nice to come down, and Mike has more time than me, so I can check to Mike, and he kind of checked me at dinner anyway a couple times. So, I deserve that, and I need that, and we all need that. We need to be sometimes know where we are, and it's important for me to have people that are on the path in front of me. People that have, continued to many times just trudge, because, my emotions and my sincerity level hasn't always matched my actions. Sometimes I'm just doing the deal, and that kind of ebbs and flows for me. I know many people that's the case in Alcoholics Anonymous. We kind of ebb and flow sometimes. That's true even in my prayer life today. Sometimes I'm just not totally sincere, and I'm going through the actions, but that's okay. And so anyway, I'm kind of putting the cart before the horse a little bit. My story is actually fairly pathetic. I'm better off if I stay sober, because I'm always impressed with these guys, rob banks and, escaped insane asylums, and there's a few nods here, but, my drinking is kind of pathetic. I'm a whiner by nature. I'm pretty much a guy that just likes to think a lot and, sit at home and analyze stuff, and it's just not exciting. It doesn't make for good, story material. So I'm kind of a pathetic drunk. I grew up in a little town in Wisconsin, and I could tell Larry was from up in that area when he talked, and I talk funny like that too, I guess. It was a very small town, and my mindset for a long time was that everybody there drank, and that was kind of why I drank. It was my environment. It was just what we did, and I've gone back since. That's not totally true. There's plenty of people there that don't drink, that seem to be living fairly normal, comfortable lives. A good friend of mine that I grew up with, which I always thought he kind of drank like I did. He doesn't drink anymore. He's coach of the high school football team and seems to be doing very well. That would not have been the path I would have taken. I was 21 when I got sober, and I certainly was positioned to die, basically. I mean, I just wasn't going very well, and I guess I'll get into that in a little more detail. But I grew up in a small town, and my first experiences with drinking were kind of incidental. I mean, I didn't really set out to be an alcoholic or think about that. I didn't really think about that at all. It was just purely what guys did. They were going out and vandalizing or doing graffiti, I would have done that too and did that too. And one night it was just they drank, and so I drank with them, and really gave it no thought, and it didn't really seem to have much of an effect. I didn't drink that much, but I can tell you the first time I got drunk, I remember that vividly. It was a snowy night in Friendship, Wisconsin, the town I grew up in, and it was one of those nights where you probably don't have them a lot down in Dallas, but it's kind of an orange tint to the sky, and the snow is just kind of falling lightly, and it's very still and very calm. It's very, very beautiful. And there was this guy that was a couple years older than me that had a bottle of Catherine the Great vodka, and $3.99 a quart or whatever the heck it is, and he had two olive green coffee cups. And we proceeded to kind of walk around the snowy streets of Friendship, Wisconsin, drinking, this Catherine the Great vodka. And I remember, feeling wonderful. In fact, he told me that the next day he told me I kept saying over and over, "This is phenomenal." And I don't remember saying that, but I remember it feeling that way. And I ended up that night passing out in a snowbank outside of a gas station. From that, we busted in on a dance at the VFW, and I'm cutting the rug with some old ladies, and vague recollection of that. That's certainly not in my nature. And then I ended up passing out in the basement, his unfinished basement, at his house, and had fallen and smashed my head. And so when I woke up, I was kind of stuck to the cement floor, and it was not a good first drunk. I mean, the consequences weren't tremendous or anything, but it was a lot for being 14 years old. And that next day, my family was to have gone down to see the Nutcracker play Christmas time, and I kind of blew that and ruined that family event. And so those were the consequences. I was deathly ill, and I got in trouble. But in spite of that, like you hear over and over, I knew instinctively that I was going to do that again. There wasn't much question in my mind whether or not I was going to do that again. Obviously needed to work on, some of the details, but I was going to drink more, and I proceeded to drink more. And I'll add a little bit of color to my drinking, but I can sum it up pretty much like this, because I got sober fairly young. The more I drank, the harder it was for me to be sober. My very nature sober, even before I drank, was that I was generally just very uncomfortable. I was very concerned about what you thought of me because I just assumed that you were thinking of me. I was very on edge, and they used to, call that self-conscious. That Erik's very self-conscious, which is just self-centeredness. That's what we call it in AA. They called it shy and self-conscious. But I was just always consumed with me, and always thinking about me, and very uncomfortable most of the time. And I would put on airs, that I, such that I could do well in school to a degree, and I even was class president one year, and I, participated in sports and those kind of things, but inside I was just kind of a screaming maniac. I mean, I just was very scared and very afraid that you would find out what I was really like. And once you found that out, I thought you would certainly want nothing to do with me, and just felt awkward and geeky. And I had things to support that. I mean, I was kind of awkward and geeky. I always, was kind of small for my, I was going to say small for my size. That doesn't really make sense. Small for my age. And, I had buck teeth and pimples intermixed with freckles. And I felt kind of geeky and was a little geeky, but, I just was constantly thinking of me. And so drinking for me, was a huge solution to that. Like it is for a lot of us. Man, when I'm sober, I'm nuts. I mean, I'm just uncomfortable. And when I drink, that goes away. That, and more than that, it's almost like my life begins. The door opens, and I can float through the room, and I can interact with you. I can talk to you comfortably. I was always very afraid of, particularly of women. And, when I was drunk, I wasn't as afraid of women. I could talk to women. And, problem, though, was that, usually I would drink so fast, typically, that I would kind of blow past the mark where I made any sense. So when I was talking to the women, I was kind of blabbering and, I wasn't very effective, I guess would be the way to say that. And and again, I just to summarize to some degree, I was crazy sober, and I went from being somewhat successful as you can be in school at that age to flunking out of high school. When I was 17, I had basically accumulated enough Fs that I wasn't going to graduate. And I was also kicked out of the house when I was 17 because my parents just really had no idea what to do with me. When I was coming home at 6 in the morning or the next day sometime, after time after time after time, several ultimatums, if you keep this up, Erik, you're going to be kicked out. I eventually was. And at the time, I was really, pretty irritated about that. I mean, I really felt like they didn't understand me, and I really blamed them for my lot in life. What I wanted everybody else to think, though, was that I was kind of living a free life, that I was doing what I wanted to do. I really was a worshiper of Jim Morrison. I read his biography, or at least the first couple chapters, and I wanted to be like that. And more than anything, I wanted you to think I was like that. And so when I was kicked out of school and kicked out of the house, I lived in the 73 Dodge Dart, and in a town of 2,000 people, I mean, everybody kind of knows what you're doing. But I wanted you all to think I was kind of, living on the edge and wanted to be like Jim Morrison, I kind of dressed like that, and which is hard to pull off when you look more like Howdy Doody. But, I really wanted you to think that. And I just was kind of just goofy crazy. And what happened was the people that I would have associated with before I stopped hanging with. You begin to seek out, lower companions. And I did. I mean, the people I started hanging with were guys that weren't going to high school, that were, getting in trouble and, working at the paper mill and just kind of, just carousing. And that's what I was doing. And a lot of the areas of my life begin to fall apart. Chuck C. always talks about the departments of his life and how he's an absolute failure in every one. And I always appreciated him saying that because as I looked at my life, I was a failure in every one. My departments were different because I was, 18, 17 years old, but I was losing. I wasn't on the road to corporate success like I had fancied I would be someday. I always kind of had this idea that I would be president, I think it's amazing how many alcoholic men thought they were going to be president. I don't know what it is. I mean, our egos are such that we just really believe some of those things. That's hard to do when you're living in a 73 Dodge Dart. It's hard to get a campaign going. It's very grassroots at that point. But I really struggled with that. I as much as I wanted you to think that I was something that I wasn't, and a lot of the time I would believe that myself. The difficulty is at 2 in the morning when you're sitting in your car and you've parked for the night. You begin to have these conversations with yourself. And I'm sure you can relate if you're an alcoholic like I am. There were times where I had drank as much as I was capable of drinking. Maybe I had run out of money or run out of time. I was physically drunk, but I was still thinking. It wasn't the laughing, hilarious, let's go get him craziness. It was just kind of solemn, drunken thinking, and those were miserable times for me. I would get very extremely depressed, and I would think about all the crappy stuff I had done, and one of the things that used to haunt me a lot was I had a little brother that was 8 years younger than me, and he's my only brother. And a lot of the times my parents would go out of town and they would leave me to take care of him, and my plan for that was typically to lock him in his room for the weekend. And, literally lock him in his room for the weekend, okay? And he would bang on the door if he had to, use the restroom or whatever, and let him out. And if he mouthed off, I'd throw him back in there. And, and I just was out of control. And I'm sure for, an 8, 9-year-old kid, it was pure terror. Sometimes he would be able to kind of work his way out with some kind of tool or whatever on the door, and he'd come out and then he'd be exposed to just pure unadulterated alcoholism in many forms. And, I remember times I'd kind of come to and he'd be sitting in front of the TV eating cornflakes watching cartoons, and there'd be people, after bar crowd passed out in our living room. I mean, I just exposed him to some stuff that, I feel terrible about. And he's my brother, but, I hear people talk about, exposing their children to those type of things. And, man, my heart just sinks when I hear that stuff because it just reminds me of what I put my brother through. And anything could have happened to the kid. I, have no idea. And so we had a very fragmented relationship for a long time. And those were the things I would think about at 2 a.m. and what a loser I was. How many times would he come in, bust into my room, and here I was, dealing drugs or, doing something like that, or, just stuff that he shouldn't have been seeing. And so you think about that stuff. The coolness and the act that you want to put on just kind of falls away, and the reality of your own alcoholism hits you hard, and you have those conversations. And a lot of times I would entertain those thoughts of, man, I should just check out. This is, what am I doing? I just get that kind of morose and that depressed. And the last year of my drinking was really just a lot of that kind of depressing, stuff. That pattern continued. And I would try to quit, and I wouldn't be able to quit. And, and I had a lot of these deals where if you want to come back for Thanksgiving, you got to go talk to this counselor kind of stuff, and which was always an opportunity for me to stock up. So I would, on food or whatever. So I would go to those counselors, and most of the time I would just, play along and do whatever. I really never took any of that seriously, although there were a lot of good intentioned people trying to help me. And but I never really saw value in what these people were telling me because I knew they really didn't understand what it was like to be where I was. Most alcoholics absolutely think nobody understands our case. That is one of the things we suffer from, is that, and it's one of the things we all have in common, is that we think we're so damn unique that nobody can really understand us. You really don't know. And that's what I felt when I was talking to these people, whether they were counselors or people in churches or whatever, principals or police. I also had kind of a shoplifting problem, and I got in trouble a lot for stealing stuff from stores. Shoplifting, they call that. And I was getting in trouble, seeing a lot of people, having a lot of ultimatums, and none of that was sinking in. None of that was sinking in. When I was 18, I looked up my real father, and I thought maybe that would kind of spark me back to something. And I hadn't seen him since I was 2, so I'm sure he was anxious to see me. 18. And I created some kind of story or whatever that I needed to see him and something, basically just to get in and have a place to stay. And man, I just, whole new setting, and I just totally terrorized that family. I mean, he had a wife, a daughter, none of them had ever really known me. And I just tore that family apart and lied and stole stuff from them and smashed stuff up and got in a car accident in their neighborhood. And one time there was a party for this girl at a country club, and I was kind of half in a blackout, and I walked into the bathroom, and I remember part of this. I just started karate kicking the walls in. I don't know why. I just started kicking all the walls into this bathroom, and I came out, and the father of this daughter at this country club that was having this party, was like, man, what happened in the bathroom? Somebody just terrorized the bathroom. Who did that? And I looked down, and I got plaster on my shoes. I'm like, man, I did that, and I gotta go, And and another time, I was coming home and staying with these people, and I kind of drove over it was garbage day. Everybody had their garbage out in this suburban neighborhood, and I just kind of half on the road, half on the lawn, for a couple blocks, and it's like, I don't know why I did that stuff. I would. It would get to where I would be so drunk, I'd just be kind of in a blind rage, and which is dangerous. When you're 5'7", you get beat up a lot is what happens. And I got beat up a lot. I mean, I'm just not a good fighter, and I get mouthy and I get angry, and so things weren't going well, and I terrorized that family, and I felt terrible about that. It lasted like 4 or 5 months, and then I headed back to Wisconsin from Chicago, and I'm trying to do something to spark me back, and I moved in with this hippie house. It was a co-op in Madison, Wisconsin, right on the campus, and it was a lot of, early '80s, a lot of kind of hippie wannabes, and so I, bought some tie-dyes, and I had kind of long hair anyway, and some sweaters and stuff, and talked about Dead shows that I'd never been to, and just to try to fit in, and the problem with a co-op is it's kind of it's a co-op. You're supposed to help each other, and I'm stealing their tofu and and their other stuff, and they asked me to leave. And one of the other things I was doing is a lot of the people in the hippie drug scene don't really take well to alcoholics. I mean, I'm sitting on the front steps with some of the local street people drinking Wild Rose, and walking down to the Antelope liquor store to buy a bottle for everybody chips in a buck, and then we take turns swigging. That was my social circle. Those are the people that I felt comfortable drinking with, and the hippies just didn't want that kind of riffraff on their front porch. So they asked me to leave, and and I kind of went from that to the idea that I needed to work. I just need to work. I need to get a job, and I need to work. And I think a lot of us have had that idea, particularly when you're in that stage of your life anyway. I'm going to be a man. I need to get a job. And so I became a mason's tender, which is you're the guy that carries the bricks to the bricklayers is basically what that means. And, and I did that. And the problem with being on the construction site is, man, I just... I am so crazy that I'm like busting out in tears half the time, and and these guys would say stuff to me that would offend me, and I'd just start crying, and I wasn't fitting in with, but I had cut my hair, bought the flannel shirts and all that stuff, but I wasn't cutting the construction scene either, and I'm like, and I've heard so many good speakers talk about that, our nature of being a chameleon, wanting to fit in and wanting to, be like the people around you, so they don't figure you out, so you can kind of fit in. And I did a lot of that, and I was really a shell of a person. I really had no depth and no soul at all. I was whatever I thought you wanted me to be, and which might qualify me for Al-Anon a little bit. I don't know. I mean, because I've heard a lot of Al-Anons talk about that. That kind of a deal. I mean, I've heard other alcoholics say they didn't care about those kind of things. They just liked to drink. But it seemed like my nature was to always be consumed with me and thinking what you thought about me. And so, anyway, what I had done at about 1920, these periods of depression were getting a little bit more severe, such that I was now willing to maybe try to find something that could spark me back. And I started going to some counselors on my own accord, and somewhat because my parents wanted me to, but I was looking for answers at this point, and suspected that I may have a problem. And I was going to these counselors, and I was also going to a lot of churches. I had kind of a vague notion that God was an answer. I don't know where I got that, probably from going to church when I was a kid, I guess. But I had that in the back of my mind. The thing that always happened for me, though, is when I would go to the churches, and I went to a lot of different kinds of churches, is I just felt very, very dirty and very, unclean, and couldn't fit in there. And the people were great. People would, hey, we're going to go play volleyball, or we're going to get together and study the Bible. Do you want to come? And I couldn't bring myself to do that. I was just too terrified of that, and I just felt like those people really didn't understand me, and I just couldn't do that. That wasn't for me. I was too separate from those good intentioned people, and so church didn't seem to be an answer for me. And I also was very critical and very cynical. When I heard people talk about passing the basket because we needed to build a new annex onto the church, I just would write that off as well. It's just about the money, or I would think about the Catholic religion, which I was kind of raised in, and how the Pope in the 14th century had a girlfriend, and so it's crap. I know and I'd come up with some crazy notion of why, to excuse myself from that, and I never really could find an answer. All these places that I was looking, there's one real common denominator, though, is that I was looking for the answer still within me. I was counting on me to figure it out, to learn some piece of information so I could apply that to my life and fix me. And I really hadn't surrendered yet. And what ultimately happened is I just got very suicidal, and I got very depressed and very crazy. And I got to where I was basically, I had moved into a vacated apartment, and kind of on the sly, and was living in this place with no electricity or anything, shades drawn, just really in fear and in terror most of the time that I would be found out, which makes sense. I mean, if you're living in a vacated apartment, you should be afraid that they're going to come and find out that you're living there. No mystery, but that's what was going on, and that coupled with just all the other craziness, it was just an awful, depressing time. And I was seeing this one counselor, which she suggested that I go to AA. And she just simply said, I'm an alcoholic. I've been sober a year. And I go to AA. Maybe you should try going to AA. Sounds like you have a problem with drinking. And I went. I went because she said that. And she talked about how she would be drinking and have her kids in the back seat as she was going to the grocery store. And I thought, for her to tell me that was kind of amazing. I can't believe she shared that with me. And so I went to AA. And I went in part because this woman was attractive too, and I didn't have a lot going on. She was listening to me for whatever, $30 an hour or whatever it was, but she was listening to me, and I just didn't have much going on. I was pretty pathetic that way. I went for 6 years with, I don't have to say that, I guess. But, that wasn't happening for me. I didn't have, my drinking didn't allow for that. My self-centered fear didn't allow for that. So anyway, I was infatuated with this counselor. I went to AA in part to find her. And I didn't find her. I found a bunch of old men, that made me feel welcome, but I certainly didn't, at first glance, want what they had. I was 21 years old, and they just seemed to be kind of at the end of the rope. They were maybe 40, 50, but I was not where they were at all. It was a little town in Wisconsin, and the meeting was in the basement of the town hall, swinging light bulb kind of thing. And it was just dark and kind of depressing, and the smoke and the coffee, and I just wasn't that excited about it. But the guys there made me feel welcome, and they said, come back. My first meeting was on a Wednesday, and they said, come back. So I came back. And, my first 6 months of being sober is really kind of a blur. I know that at about 6 months, I kind of just realized I had not drank for 6 months. I mean, it doesn't sound very exciting, but that's really what it was. It was almost like, wow, I hadn't drank for 6 months by going to these meetings religiously. And that was really my experience. And I'm sure there was a lot going on. I mean, I'm sure I was crazy and goofy and all that, which I know I was. But I don't remember much of it. I just remember going to meetings over and over and over. I wasn't working. I had no other place to go, so I went to a lot of meetings. And between 6 and 8 months, I remember this, though, vividly, I started getting the idea that AA wasn't working. It was like, I would go to these meetings and it would be okay for an hour, but after that hour, I was leaving the meeting, and I was now very conscious of the fact that I was absolutely stark raving crazy. And I was feeling more depressed and more suicidal between meetings than I was between drunks. At 8 months sober, I was just absolutely out of my mind, and I didn't know why, because I was going to these meetings, but I was just insane. And about that time, there was this guy that had seen me in some meetings and tried to talk to me after meetings before, and he stopped me one day. He stood physically in front of the door, and on this occasion, he said, Erik, look, your problem is that you're a selfish little SOB. And unless you ask for help, you're probably going to leave here. And if you do, you may not come back. You come to these meetings and you put a few slogans together and you blurb out some stuff that you don't even know what you're saying, and that's not going to cut it anymore. You need to get in Alcoholics Anonymous. And I thought two things when he said that to me. I thought, well, who the heck are you? I mean, you're not supposed to take people's inventories in AA. That's the kind of stuff I pick up on. And but the other thing I thought was, how does he absolutely know that? I mean, how is he able to cut right through and describe me to a T? And I hated this guy. But I ended up asking him to sponsor me. Short story. I said, all right, fine, Marty, what am I supposed to do? Fine, what am I supposed to do? And that being a question that was probably the most important question I'd ever asked. He sat me down and he wrote out 6 things for me to do, which none of them were in the big book. I mean, they were weird things, which I wouldn't recommend anybody else. But at the time, I was willing to do anything. He could have said, stand on one leg in front of a mirror, naked, whistling Dixie, and I would have done that. You know, I would have done whatever. He said, okay, fine. I had surrendered. I had given up. And I'd reached that point that I think anybody that stays in Alcoholics Anonymous and is active in AA gets to. And that's a point where you just turn in, you know, throw in the towel, and you're done. You give up. That's what I did with Marty. And Marty had me do stuff. You know, he got me involved in Alcoholics Anonymous. Marty was crazy. Marty didn't have a sponsor himself. But he was all that there was there. And I did what he did. He was a guy that would ride around on his motorcycle with a bandana and, you know, long hair. And he was just a scary, imposing, large man. He had done 2 tours in Vietnam. It actually said that on the side of his motorcycle. And he was just a scary guy. But when Marty talked, you knew that he had been where you had been. And Marty saved my life. You know, Marty was the best example of Alcoholics Anonymous that I had then. And Marty sponsored a bunch of guys, and we all followed him around. They called us Marty's disciples. We walked around with our big book like it was a shield, and we'd invade meetings and, you know, try to take it over. And it was just kind of crazy, but a lot of fun. And Friday nights we had a fish fry, and we'd all go out for fish fry after the meeting. And Marty had us start a meeting at the state mental hospital there. And we just, you know, one of the things he said you absolutely need to do is you need to make these other guys your best friends. And I had absolutely nothing in common with these guys. There was one of these guys drove the city bus in Madison, Wisconsin. Bill, one of the guys, had sold used restaurant equipment. One guy was on work release, so he could just come to the meetings and then, you know, come visit with us on weekends. One guy repaired computers. It was just, you know, I'm a flunk out loser, you know, hippie construction worker wannabe, and we just hung together. I mean, we did everything together. We'd go shopping together. We'd do laundry together. We'd go to the movies together, and I just did everything with these guys, and it was an amazing time. It was an amazing time, and you know, in about 2.5 years after doing that, you know, Marty said, "Hey, you know, I want you to go to school," and you know, Marty, I flunked out of high school. And he said, I want you to go to school. And how you're going to do that is you're going to get a tutor for every class. And so I was able to take some classes and get into the University of Wisconsin. And I had even tried a couple years prior in a drunken stupor and flunked out in a semester. I mean, I had like a .73, so I was not a good student. Marty said, you're going to get a tutor for every class, and you're going to study, and here's your schedule. You're going to make out a schedule. And I did that. And you know, Marty had never been to college. But he helped me apply the principles of AA into going to school. And I ended up going to the University of Wisconsin and getting a degree. And I studied Chinese, of all things. I learned how to speak Chinese. You know, I don't know why. I think, honestly, the truth was I thought if I went to China, I wouldn't be the shortest guy around or something. I'm not kidding either. I really think that was part. So I learned to speak Chinese, and in fact, I was living with these guys from China for a year or two as I was going to school, and we'd have AA meetings, and we'd have Chinese people there, and it was a crazy, weird time, and you know, they were coming to our open meetings, and it was just bizarre, but. You know, I just was in love with Alcoholics Anonymous, and about the time that I graduated, Marty kind of split. Marty was one of these guys, and I've seen guys like him. They're kind of these lone wolf AAs. They're very charismatic, can really reach out to the newcomer, but they have absolutely no structure or accountability in their life, and they drift, and they go from meeting to meeting, and and that's what Marty did. Marty left. Marty actually left the state. And here I was, you know, a few years sober with no sponsor. And I went that way for about 6 months. And I was just absolutely out of my mind, insane, not knowing what I was going to do. Here I was, you know, graduated school and, you know, no sponsor. I'm still going to meetings, but I don't know what, you know, it was just one of those points where you're almost starting over. I didn't know what to do. And the guy that's had repaired computers that Marty sponsored and moved out to Nebraska. And I called Steve up and I said, Steve, I don't know what to do, man. I'm struggling. Marty left, and he knew, and he said, why don't you come on out here? We got a deal out here called the Cornhusker Roundup, and I'll tell you, Erik, he's told me since I've been out here, it's just been amazing. I've seen AA in a whole new way, and you ought to come out. So I got some guys that I sponsored, and we drove out to the Cornhusker Roundup in 1990 in Omaha, and it just blew me away. It just absolutely blew me away. It was 4,000 people there that year, and it was, I'd always heard these speaker tapes back in this little town in Wisconsin, and I'd hear these great speakers, but I never saw AA like that anywhere, I'd hear it in tape land, but I never really saw it real live, And here I was, and I remember Hank Johnson was one of the speakers, and I just always loved Hank Johnson. He was one of my favorite speakers, and he was speaking, and it was like going to a rock concert. It was just, man, that's Hank Johnson live, and it was incredible. And I went up to him and I remember, man, Mr. Johnson, we listened to your tape on the way from Wisconsin, and wow, it's so cool to see you, and he pulls you through the line, and he didn't really care, but it was just exciting, and I ended up asking Steve to sponsor me. And a few months later, I had an opportunity to go to graduate school and got accepted to a program in Nebraska, and moved out to Lincoln, Nebraska. And I just fell in love with AA all over again. The thing that I was missing was this whole ethic of sponsorship. You can stay sober, reading the big book every day and being an AA expert and going to the meetings and just But man, I wasn't plugged into anything. I had no accountability, and I had no peers, and I had no sponsorship chain, and I got that in Nebraska, and I was plugged in, and I was on fire with it, and I fell in love with AA there. We had a great young group up there in Lincoln. It was about 150 people. It was a vibrant young group. Reminds me a lot of the Phoenix group in Norman. Everybody was dating each other, and it was just crazy. It's like the 90210 of AA, and I met my wife there, and she was a newcomer. She was 10 months sober when I finally asked her out. But I remember when she first came to the meeting, she walked right into a wall with a cup of coffee and knocked her right over, and coffee spilled, and she was looking the other way, and wow, yeah, that's the one, and I knew she would, And so our ethic up there was you got to wait a year before you mess with the newcomer, But at 10 months, I asked her sponsor if I could ask her out, and she said okay. And so I asked Jeannie out, and we dated for a couple of years, and we got married, and and we've been married now for nine and a half years, I guess. And Jeannie's a great active member of Alcoholics Anonymous in Edmond, and life's been really good. I was in Nebraska and around there for about 7 years, and I've been now in Oklahoma for about 5 years. And is it 9:30? Is that what I got? Okay. And AA has just been a great experience for me. It's just I almost sometimes wish I had some tragic event that would be a good crying point in my talk. I really don't have that. My life's actually been fairly good. I've been blessed. I've had a very almost Cinderella-like life since I've been in Alcoholics Anonymous. I ended up going to graduate school and doing well there, and got a job, and they sent me to China, and I was able to spend a lot of time over in China and representing our company. It was one of these deals where it's like, man, we got this project in China. Boy, I wish we had somebody that spoke Chinese, And they sent me over there, and I got to, go to a lot of meetings in China back in the early 90s, and man, that was exciting, and just had some great experiences with that. And back then they were kind of clandestine. You had to knock, and they'd let you in, and it was no Chinese people. It was all foreigners that lived there, and it was just exciting and a lot of fun. And I really enjoyed that, and I had a lot of good experiences, and one that I'll share that really changed my life. I was over there one time, and I got deathly ill. I got absolutely deathly ill, and was cooped up in this hotel by myself for 4 days, and just really sick. I mean, bad sick, and I came out of it kind of feeling better, and I knew I needed to get something to eat, and so I was walking down to try to find some bread or something non-Chinese because the thought of that was making me nauseous. and I found some bread, and I'm walking back to the hotel down this alley, and it was one of these alleys where it was like also kind of the sewage canal type deals, and just awful foul stench. And I heard this music, and it was just this unbelievable music, and I just didn't know where it was coming from. And as I got closer to it, I saw these two blind, crippled old people that were sitting in this filth that were playing this music. And it was the most beautiful music. I mean, it was unbelievable. And I'd always had this idea that if there really was a God, why is there all this crap in the world? Why do people die, and why is there this and all that? And I just always would think about stuff like that. And when I saw these two people there and heard this music, all I can tell you is it was like I knew God was there. I was able to see God in the face of these people. And and here's a country of 1.5 billion or 2 billion people, whatever it is, and it's like, how is God here? How is God involved in this deal? I mean, I think God's helping me find a parking spot at the meeting. What about China? And here I was, and it was like I just knew that God was there, and that I just didn't have to worry about that stuff. That my job is really just an AA. That I'm just got to do what I'm supposed to do. I don't need to worry about all those big worldly issues, that it's going to be okay. And that was just an amazing experience. I came back from that trip and I cried for a week. Jeannie thought I had caught some weird disease or something. I just was, it just blew me away. And, my life is good today. We have 2 little children. That's a beautiful, wonderful thing. And the thing about that is, it's anybody can have a kid, really, just about. I mean, that's not that hard, but I've learned how to be a father in Alcoholics Anonymous and be an active participant in my family. That's something I never thought I'd be capable of doing, and today I can do that. And and kids are just kids. Thing I'm learning right now is that they're really more God's kids than mine. I'm more of a caretaker. When I start taking ownership of them, really what that's about is I'm trying to look good. When they act up in the grocery store, it's really more about me concerned whether or not somebody's going to think I'm a bad parent. And that's kind of some of the stuff I'm thinking about right now and looking at is, they're just God's kids. I'm just supposed to take care of them. And that's a good deal. I mean, I'm really blessed to have the life I have. I get to do some pretty neat stuff in my life today. And, one thing I'll just share, and, next weekend I get to fly up and see my brother. And we go to a Packer game every year. And, and we have a good relationship today. A couple months ago, I flew up and he's a musician and he had a big concert in Chicago, and I got to fly up and surprise him and see him afterwards on the stage, and I really enjoyed that. And about a week after that, I was sitting at an IHOP with my family, with Jeannie and the kids and Edmond, and I look up and here's my brother standing there. He flew down to see me, and in my life, and a little different. I mean, he's playing in a rock concert, I'm eating at an IHOP with 2 screaming kids, but it touched me a lot, because we didn't talk for a long time, and today we get to do those kind of things together, and I never thought I'd have that kind of relationship with him again, and that's been a really good thing. Life is good, and AA is absolutely saved my ass. I mean, AA has given me the life I have today. A couple things that I'll wrap up with real quickly. What I do in Alcoholics Anonymous today is fundamentally the same thing that I do or did when I got sober and was asked to do even by Marty. And that's that I have a home group. I have a place that I call home. A place that I show up to. My home group, we meet twice a week just like you guys do, and I'm there. And I'm absolutely there every Tuesday and Sunday. The other thing I do is I sponsor guys. I'm willing to be a sponsor and have a sponsor. And that doesn't mean I have to have all the answers. That just means I have to be willing to share my experience. And I really like what you said about experience, because the quality and the quantity are both a function of experience. I need to know that you've been where I've been. I need to know that that you've absolutely got an answer for me. And I get that here. And that's what I get to share. I get to share my experience. I don't share my opinion. I share what I do. It's what we do. And that's what we do in Edmond, and I get to be a part of that. And, so having a home group is important. And my relationship with my sponsor fundamentally is really an extension of, that first 5th step I did with my first sponsor. You know, I have to have somebody in my life that knows absolutely everything about me. I can't have any secrets. You know, Jim knows everything about me. And that doesn't mean I call Jim every Thursday night at 9:30 and say, hey, Jim, you know, what color socks do I wear today? But if I got some issue going on, any kind of life-changing event or something that's troubling me or whatever, even if nothing's troubling me, I call him Thursdays at 9:30. And I've actually missed some myself. But I do that. I do that. I'm accountable to my sponsor. I need that. I need accountability to my sponsor. I try to be a good example at work. I try to do what I can to be, represent AA as best I can at work. And in fact, my boss called me on the way down here to wish me well speaking tonight. He knows I'm an AA. Bobby was swearing on the phone as I was talking to my boss, but he knew what I was doing tonight. And I appreciate Bobby driving down with me tonight. I appreciate the guys I sponsor. Obviously, are not desperate enough to come down and hear me talk tonight, but Bobby was, so I appreciate that. It's really an honor to speak here tonight. If you don't relate to what I said tonight, I know there's going to be another speaker here next week. My experience is just simply this. AA has helped me. AA has given me a life, and it's taught me how to live comfortably today without having to take a drink. And I'm grateful for being here tonight. Thank you.